Good morning. You are listening to National Real Estate Auction Radio. I am your host, Doug Dennison, and we are broadcasting from beautiful St. Augustine, Florida, the nation's oldest city at WFOY 1240 AM studios. Through the power of the internet, this program is being streamed worldwide on 1240news.com. The show will also be archived on RowellAuctions.com as they are the host of this program. Additionally, the show will be posted on YouTube.com. We're going to be talking about real estate auctions, past auctions, upcoming auctions, different real estate markets across the country. We've got a lot of topics today. To help us out, we've got several real estate and auction leaders calling in. We've got Washington, D.C. calling in. We've got Los Angeles, California calling in. And we've got Moultrie, Georgia calling in. Our goal and our mission statement is to provide an educational experience for listeners in a promotional format for auctions across the country. Very pleased to be on the show for more than a year now, and very happy to be talking to you, bringing you real estate leaders and auction leaders across the country to give their VIP expert opinions about the marketplace, real estate auctions. The people who listen here are real estate investors, real estate brokers, real estate media, auctioneers, government officials, banking leaders, and also bankruptcy attorneys. We've got them all. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the excitement that's been up in Washington, D.C. I have been following for almost a year, at least 9 months, the fact that there is a whole bunch of government surplus properties that the government owns, needs to sell. President Obama brought it out first in 2011 in the State of the Union address, and then followed up on the budget address in Baltimore. That was like in February. And talked about the fact that they've got 14,000 properties, and this has nothing to do with Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae. This is not houses. This is warehouses. This is office space. This is land and properties that are being underutilized and costing the American taxpayer a great deal of money. One of the things I talk about almost weekly is the post office up in Washington, D.C. that had been vacant for 10 years. And if you've ever been in Washington, D.C., these buildings, they go for blocks. I mean, it's just amazing how big they are. And anyway, every year it costs the government $6 million to maintain that property. Now, $6 million times 10 years, that's $60 million that you and I as taxpayers are paying for. And that's not right. And so we're hoping that there's a bill, H.R. 1734, that Congressman Duncan has passed in the House. He led and got co-sponsors, and it passed in the House, which basically talks about coming up with a commission to sell these properties, to utilize them more efficiently, and so that's very exciting. We have hopefully today a congressman coming up and going on the line and on the air, talking about his feelings, what's happening in Washington, and we're anxious to get his call. Why is it important as a taxpayer to make sure these properties are sold? Well, the problem is that most people don't know the amazing cost of a property that is not being used. And it's not just for the seller, but it's for the area. Usually the costs are maintenance, security, lighting, insurance, usually the grass cutting, or whatever it is. And this kind of cost it keeps on going. And if you don't sell the property, it keeps on going and going and going. And when that happens, especially when you're a government entity and have these properties, and of course the United States government is the biggest landlord in the world, with more than 1 million properties, believe it or not, 1 million properties. So that's what's happening. It costs the area too, just like if you were in a cul-de-sac and you had a house and one of the properties was foreclosed. Well, usually what happens is the grass gets higher, the pool turns green, all of a sudden there's a cracked window, a broken window, some vandalism, maybe there's lights on at night from area kids. All that kind of stuff devalues your property next door. Well, it's the same kind of thing when a big property is shut down. The neighboring businesses, the neighboring properties also are being devalued. Until that is sold, until that is being used, until that is being brought into a situation where a new buyer buys it. He hires people. He gets contractors to work on the buildings. He buys products. Again, all of this stuff is like a mini community development program, and it uplifts the area. And again, the direct correlation, if it isn't being used, is all those properties are being down and not valued correctly, and also it's bad for the area economy. And again, if you're the government, you don't pay taxes. So if you are a new owner of a property, then you're paying taxes to municipalities, and that's obviously a good thing. Again, we're going to be calling in to the show. We've got Washington, D.C., we've got Los Angeles, we've got Moultrie, California. We've got our first call. Good morning, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning. This is Congressman Jeff Duncan. How are you?
Well, fine. And Congressman, you and I have never met, but I've been working with Alan Klump, your Director of Communications, and he represents you very, very well, and I'm thrilled to have you on the show today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Congressman. What's your background, and why did you get into politics?
Well, for 16 years, I ran my own auction company in South Carolina. And worked for a Southeast regional firm prior to starting my own company. And so, entrepreneurial spirit. Ran in 2002 for the South Carolina General Assembly, the House of Representatives there. So I served for 8 years in Columbia, South Carolina, in our House of Representatives, and then decided to run for Congress with the vacancy of our congressman who ran for governor last year. And so I think I bring a lot of experience of being a small business owner, a guy who has signed the front of a paycheck, not just cash and paychecks. I bring that to Washington. I'm proud to serve with another fellow auctioneer, Billy Long, here, and we understand, a lot of things that I think are missed here in Washington about, how average families and average small businesses are dealing with the government regulations and the taxation and everything that we're facing in this country. And so, there's 87 members of the freshman class that came up last year, and they came up really from all walks of life. There was RN, nurses, there are doctors, there are small business owners, large business owners, people in oil and natural gas business, people in machine shops, people that run funeral homes, and auctioneers. And so there's a world of experience, and I think we're having an impact on the process.
Well, I have had Congressman Long on the show before, along with Congressman Dennison, which gets us into an area of government surplus properties. From my understanding, you're a co-sponsor, or you were a co-sponsor of the bill H.R. 1734, which is trying to sell or at least efficiently utilize government properties that are not being used. Can you tell me a little bit about that and why that is important?
Well, it is important. The federal government is sitting on surplus raw land, buildings, you name it, that it's just sitting in inventory. We're having to maintain. As an auctioneer, I know when you got a piece of property that's sitting vacant, that you've got the threat of vandalism, you've got the holding cost of insurance and taxation, although the government doesn't pay taxes, but that is less taxes for the local community if the federal government owns that property. You've got all these things, liability and other things that could happen with vacant surplus property. And so in the auction business, we use that as a selling point. We're talking with our seller that, look, we can turn this to cash. You don't need to hold this. You don't need to have the holding cost. It's costing you money. There's time value of money and all of that. So we use that as a selling point. Well, the federal government is sitting on all this property, and Jeff Denham gets it, and a host of other folks that co-sponsor that legislation that is now languishing in the United States Senate, I believe, but believe that the federal government can turn this surplus property to cash, help pay down our debt. We're $15 trillion in debt in this country. We're spending $1.5 trillion, almost more than we're bringing in as a nation. And we've got these assets that we could sell, we could turn to cash and help at least get our fiscal house in order, reduce our holding cost. And so I was a very proud supporter of that. Another dynamic that I would love to see I would love to see this property, all this surplus property, sold at auction. I believe in the transparency above the board process of a public auction where we're stewards of the taxpayers, so we need to make sure that there are not backroom deals that are cut to buy property where someone benefits by reselling it when the taxpayer could have benefited by getting fair market value for the property at public auction. So I believe in that component going forward, and this applies to state government as well. When I was in the General Assembly in South Carolina, something I advocated for there for state-owned property that we could sell. Let's not do it in the back room. Let's not have any crony capitalism going on. Let's do it above the board. Let's do it in an open, transparent manner, and that's by public auction.
Well, it's the most fair way, and it's the most transparent way, just like you said. And if I'm the government, particularly the government, everyone kind of takes a pot shot at you. In other words, if I'm in charge of selling, let's pick a property, a $10 million property, and whatever systems you go through, if it's not above and transparent and everybody can see it and everybody can participate, then everybody's saying, well, gee, I could have paid more for that. How come we didn't get more for that? An auction basically lets everybody see it, and it's the fairest way. And I'm hoping, just like you are, that these properties will be sold at auction, and again allow the local people that are near these properties to participate, compared to maybe the easiest way would be, I guess, for the government is to bulk these properties, and here's 1,000, and this Wall Street company takes care of that, and here's another 1,000, and then you'd never get the chance to bid on it if you're a neighboring property.
That's right, and it creates a sort of animosity toward the government, and people realize that we as government aren't good stewards of taxpayer dollars, and they ride by these vacant buildings, or they ride by these vacant properties that they know the federal government owns, that there's no activity on. They just hold it. Well, we're not a holding business. We're not a holding company, and the federal government has no business owning these surplus properties. Now, there's a very valid balance between a wilderness area that is set aside for future generations that, protects certain valuable assets of this country. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Department of Interior vacates a building near Mammoth Mountain, and it's got some value to the either the resort or the real estate investors of the country. Let's give them an opportunity to purchase it at fair market value that's established only through the transparent open auction method that I firmly believe in, and I think most people do. They get the transparency side of the auctioneer standing there and every active participant standing there bidding in the open. in a very transparent manner that's driving the price up, in my opinion, and everybody, it's a win-win.
Well, again, I agree. I'm looking at your bio here. You were named Guardian of Small Business Award, which is very, very nice. If you were a small business owner and had a property that you haven't used for a couple years, I mean, my gosh, what would you do? You if you had no plan for it, you would sell it. And this is where we've got to get the people in Washington to understand. And I don't think everybody understands. Even the public doesn't understand how much cost there is related to a property that is not being used.
That's right. There's physical cost, actual cost of keeping it insured, patrolling it, keeping it painted, or keeping it from running down. We all know the dynamics that take place in a vacant piece of property. It's almost like the gremlins are in there peeling the paint off the wall sometimes. But heating and cooling it in there, and so things happen to a vacant building that auctioneers see every day, and they're going out in the field and they see a piece of property that's been sitting vacant for a while. Now, those are holding costs. The vagrants that could get in, I guess the graffiti, everything that happens to vacant properties the longer they sit. And so those are holding costs, and then the time value of money. If you could turn that property to cash and then take that cash and invest it, that has value. There is value of getting that money quicker than unless it's in a rapidly appreciating market, which we haven't seen in the United States in the last couple of years due to the downturn in the economy. Then let's turn this stuff to cash and let's pay down our debt. That's what smart business owners do. Or let's make smart investments either in another piece of real estate or in some other kind of investment within our business. And I'll just tell you this. I'm going through an auction right now on some rental property that I have in my home county just because one of them's sitting vacant. The others, I'm in a joint venture with a friend, and we're just ready to go our separate ways, and we're going to turn this stuff to cash and pay off our debt and move on. I believe in it. I believe in it to the point that I'm utilizing it myself.
Well, that's wonderful. To bring the point home to our listeners, who are the general public and real estate investors and real estate media, there's been a property up in Washington, a post office that's been vacant for 10 years and costs the federal government $6 million a year to maintain. That's $60 million that the taxpayer is paying. Now, from my understanding, there's been a move that is going to be finally moved because of people like you and Congressman Dennison that has pushed this process, but that's just one property. I mean, the cost is amazing, and taxpayers need to know.
Oh, there's no doubt. That is just one example of thousands across this great land where properties are just sitting vacant. And it's not only the cost to the federal government taxpayer being able to recoup that, but I think about the local communities that have federally owned property that are sitting vacant, that if a private investor or a private entity had that, they'd be paying local property taxes on that. That increases the tax roll in the local community to provide the police and fire and other services. Right now, they're not getting any taxes on that federal property. And I've got a county in my district, McCormick, South Carolina, that is owned, most of the county, and I think it's about 75% of the entire county is owned by the federal government. Now, a lot of that's national forest and other things, but that county doesn't have a tax base. That county doesn't have an industrial base because there's nowhere to bring an industrial park in. The federal government isn't paying any taxes. So the school district suffers, the local county administration suffers, the local prison suffers. It's just a whole trickle-down effect because the federal government owns most of the land and not paying any taxes. And so there is another side of that equation that is often not thought about and lost.
Well, I think also is if it is sold and a new private investor is in there, I think the area businesses and area properties begin to increase their value compared to if it's languishing, it's really devalued, and that's important.
Oh, there's no doubt. It's like pushing the first domino. Once we allow these properties to be sold by the federal government, private investors, they buy the property, they rehab it, they redevelop it. Activity breeds activity. More activity comes in, and the community thrives. And so we need to push that first domino with passing this legislation.
Congressman Duncan, thank you so much for being on the show and your support of auctions, and again, you and Congressman Long and Congressman Denham, you're a nice fresh breath of air up there, and thank you for working so hard for us. How can people get a hold of you and to tell you thank you for your support?
Well, there's a couple of ways. You can go to our website. You can Google me, just Jeff Duncan, South Carolina's 3rd Congressional District. JeffDuncan.house.gov is the actual website. Our phone number, 202-225-5301 here in Washington. And you can email me through Facebook. There's just a lot of ways. Go on Google, look me up. I'm not the basketball player. I'm not the baseball player. I'm the United States Congressman from the 3rd District of South Carolina.
Congressman, thank you so much for being on the air, and you have a great weekend.
You do the same. Thanks.
You bet. Bye-bye. Good stuff. Good stuff. Congressman Jeff Duncan from South Carolina talking to us about the need to sell these properties to help balance the budget, to get it off of the taxpayers continually paying maintenance cost every year. Also brought up the fact that a great way to do it is through auctions because it's fair, it's transparent. We also discussed that one of the things that we don't want to see, and hopefully this bill passes and the Senate starts supporting it, and it's really a bipartisan issue. Come on, folks. This is not a game we should play. We need to help our balance the budget and help our taxpayers. But very, very important message from Congressman Duncan, and he's from South Carolina. Talked about the fact that let's not do it with 1,000 properties at a time through a Wall Street investment firm. The people in the area deserve to be able to bid on one individual asset at a time. And that's the fairest way, it's the most transparent way, and you'll get more money. I mean, obviously, if you sell in bulk, you're going to get less money. That's just the way it is.